Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again. This, for the final time in the 2024-25 season, is Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. My name is Brent Axe, and yes, it's over. Syracuse finishes 14-19 on the season, one of the most disappointing seasons in Syracuse history in recent memory, and a lot of our lifetimes, frankly. The most losses Syracuse piled up since a team in the early 1960s went 2-22, and the Orange sputters to the finish, losing to SMU in the ACC Tournament. The final score tonight, 73-53. SMU knocks off the Orange, a SMU team that Syracuse only lost to by 2 points just 9 days ago, but tonight lose by 20, and fittingly, in a way, Syracuse scores the least points of the season in its last game of the season. A Syracuse team that struggled in the second half throughout ACC play. Mostly, they would build up big leads and lose those big leads. Tonight, they couldn't do anything in the second half, shooting 8 of 30 in the second half of this game. SMU just absolutely smothers Syracuse on defense, taking out SU's main offensive weapon for a lot of games. Eddie Lampkin, who had just 5 points, did manage 10 rebounds in this game. J.J. Starling led Syracuse with 16, but by no means had a good game. 6 of 17 from the field, did hit a couple of threes, including one early, but J.J. with 4 turnovers on the night. He was playing through some kind of ailment. We'll find out in postgame here, but it looked like he strained his groin or something, got on the bike, got loose. He did come back in the game, but clearly was not 100%. Remember, JJ missed 7 games earlier this year with a wrist injury, so see what that ailment is, and he's got plenty of time to get over it because the offseason has arrived. The most important offseason Syracuse basketball, frankly, has ever had. And for Adrian Autry and company, now Alex Klein as general manager and this coaching staff, whoever they retain to come back next year, which is a big question on everybody's mind, who they get out of the transfer portal, which is going to be critical, and the incoming freshmen, namely Kiyan Anthony and Sadiq White, that have to step in and contribute right away in an era where freshmen are becoming less and less important. There are certain exceptions to that rule, certainly, but with so many coaches focusing on the portal, this is a Syracuse basketball team that now will miss the NCAA tournament for the 4th straight season. That is official. Not that we didn't know that coming into tonight, but they had that one fleeting hope that they could make an NC State-like run through this ACC tournament and clinch the NCAA tournament berth. Of course, that dies tonight in Charlotte. And by the way, since Syracuse entered the ACC, it has yet to win 2 games in a row at the ACC tournament. So just a despicable record in the ACC tournament continues for Syracuse those days. This was the anniversary of the 6 overtime game. Think of what conference tournament play in that feeling used to bring as a Syracuse basketball fan. Maybe you had the cool teacher that rolled in the TV and we'd skip work during the day, take a long lunch, and it was an event to be in a conference tournament. Syracuse in conference tournament play since it entered the ACC has just been disappointing, to use a word. I could probably use a few more stronger words there, but we'll go with that. And that's something I asked our Syracuse Sports Insiders, and we are going to get to their comments coming up here. Syracuse basketball's 2024-25 season was what? What is the word that pops to mind for you for what was certainly a disappointing season? I mean, that's the word that I think jumps right to everybody's head. Frustrating, can kind of semantics here and play with some words, but we had some great responses from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. And being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you get to text me directly anytime you want, during games, after games, before games. Just want to shoot the bull, talk Syracuse sports anytime. Being an insider not only gives you direct text message access to me, it gives you exclusive access on these post-game shows and the Syracuse Sports podcast as well. That's the only place we take comments from. We don't take comments from social media or anywhere else. You want to get your voice heard on the Syracuse Sports podcast and on these post-game shows. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider is the way to do that. The information to sign up is right there on your screen. We'll give it a shout out, though. It's joinsubtext.com/Syracuse Sports. You can also text the word orange to 315-847-3895. It's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider to get that exclusive access, breaking news first, and exclusive commentary from me. You can try free for 2 weeks, though. So check it out here. I know the basketball season is over, but spring football, a lot of you are going to hear like the hallelujah bells in the background here. Whoa! Spring football starts next week. Pro Day is St. Patrick's Day. Spring football next Friday. Fran Brown and company back at it with a quarterback competition underway. We're going to have plenty on that here on the pod and on the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. So a great time to sign up. Basketball's over. Maybe you got frustrated with basketball, but you're all in on football. We'll have you covered on the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. Lacrosse is rolling as well, so still a lot to cover on that front. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this game. I think people have bigger questions in mind. I want to give as many insiders a voice on this show tonight per the question that I asked. But in terms of this game, Syracuse is down 31-28 at halftime. Look, the first half, SMU failed to take advantage of how good their defense was, and Syracuse hung in there. And there was a point where SMU went up 31-22, and it looked like they were just going to run away with this thing, which they eventually did. But JJ and Jair Davis, the only two players in doubles tonight. JJ had 16, Jair Davis had 14 for the Orange tonight, including a couple of three-pointers. Hit 2 threes. It cuts the lead down to 31-28, and I'm texting our insider saying, look, SMU's playing great defense. Autry's got to find a way to open up this offense because SMU took Eddie Lampkin out of the game. They came in bound and determined, 2-3 guys at a time. Every time Eddie got the ball, he was swarmed. So what Syracuse failed to do was find the open guy, to move the ball, to put some flow and creativity into the offense here, which is often a problem with this team. I got some people today saying, oh, you don't think Syracuse runs plays? You should see what they did against, Florida State in a game that they barely squeaked out with a 16-point lead, whittling down to 1 last night. Syracuse does not run a discernible offense. And I know that some basketball people might disagree with me. I know some members of the coaching staff might disagree with me. Well, whatever it is, people don't know what it is, right? And it certainly got shut down tonight. And there was a lack of, and it's easy for us to say this, they didn't make any adjustments. I'm sure they tried to make some adjustments, right? But it did not carry over. And in the second half, Syracuse became tired. They became worn down. They became stagnant. The ball didn't move. The ISO ball came back. They got pushed away from the basket, and nobody could generate some offense. We mentioned that JJ was hurt. Chris Bell was in there trying to generate some offense, but Bell, who had just a disappointing season, one of the most disappointing seasons for a veteran player that Syracuse has had in recent memory, and I think he is a strong candidate to go in the transfer portal coming up here. 7 points, 1 of 4 from three-point range tonight. And I really enjoyed talking to Chris Bell this year in the locker room. He was always there, very philosophical, just somebody he's got a great head on his shoulders and knows how to talk these things out. But if we're just analyzing his play this year, just nowhere near what Syracuse needed from him on the offensive end, and certainly on all points. He got certainly out of the starting lineup at one point and just was not consistent enough off the bench for this team. We don't have to go through all the players and give them all grades here on this post-game show tonight, but a lot of the issues that Syracuse had offensively, I mean, this was the lowest amount of points they scored all year long. I mean, they even scored, it was one more point, but they scored more against Duke, right? But this is one of the bigger, another double-digit deficit for Autry. There was a lot of those this year, and this game just Syracuse sputtered after showing some fight and some life, not only against Florida State, but in the last few games of the year. But a lot of the same issues just came back to fruition tonight. And the big number I mentioned, 8 of 30 shooting in the second half. SMU outscores Syracuse 42-25 in the second half of this game. Turnovers, a major issue. They were a problem all year for Syracuse. Both teams had 15 turnovers, but Syracuse certainly piled up 215 a lot quicker. SMU kind of caught up on that. SMU ends up shooting 53% on the night. Syracuse shoots 34%. The Orange had 6 threes. They only had 2 last night against Florida State and didn't really need to hit more than that to win that game. SMU with 7. I'll tell you what, if you want to have a minor beef about something, I feel like, and I do credit the refs for not calling everything, SMU certainly got away with a lot of moving screens. They got away with a lot of physical play. They were manhandling Lampkin down low, and the whistles weren't coming. So the fouls certainly did tilt in SMU's favor, but in no way, shape, or form is that what won them this game. Okay? They tired out Syracuse. They frustrated Syracuse and just took the air right out of the balloon to the point where Syracuse just didn't even have a functional offense in the second half. So that's this game. SMU all over Eddie Lampkin. Nobody else could step up. I mean, Davis made some plays. JJ made a couple of plays, but just look at the numbers. Look at the offense. Kyle Cuff driving in the paint and getting blocked, and God love him. He's got a lot of spirit, and he can help this team in certain ways, but Kyle Cuff has to learn he's not 6'4" and can't take on these bigger players, right? So there's going to be a lot of time to dissect things and who's going in the portal and what. And shameless plug, Chris Carlson and I are going to do a live pod on all these same channels that you're watching right now. And please subscribe on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube to Syracuse Sports so you get the show and the notifications when not only we go live, but so you can listen and watch whenever you want. But Chris and I are going to do just that on the live pod. Today is now technically Thursday. It's 12:30 on the East Coast as we speak here. Thursday, 3 o'clock Eastern time. Chris and I are really going to focus on that. Who stays, who goes, and what the roster starts to look like for next year. And I know a lot of you guys had questions about that, so I don't want to jam all that into one night. We're going to have time to dissect that and look at that. The portal opens 2 weeks from Sunday. Sunday is Selection Sunday, the fourth straight year that Syracuse will be nowhere near Selection Sunday, and another disappointing and depressing March for Syracuse fans not watching their team in not only the NCAA tournament, they didn't even make the freaking NIT. They turned down the NIT last year. Think about that. Syracuse won 20 games last year and said, nah, we're good. Which a lot of teams did, by the way. They were not the only one. This year, that's not even a possibility. The NIT doesn't want you, nor did you even qualify for it as a 14 and 19 basketball team. So the rebuild of stocking this team from the portal and expecting what those freshmen are going to come in to do. I mean, think about this. You've got to win 10 more games than you did this year to be in the NCAA tournament conversation. You've got to play defense. You've got to have some sort of functioning, identifiable offense, right? There's so much that has to change in one off season. And I'll say this, it's going to be a hell of a story if it does. If they go into this portal and they spend wisely and bring in the right talent and point guard, center, three-point shooting, and just another depth guy at whatever positions you have because people get hurt and you need somebody to complement. Think of how you have got to check off all those boxes with a green mark that you hit. Because in this past portal season, it was a little shaky. Eddie Lampkin was a win. And you know what? While we're on that subject, I hope that Derek Coleman is humble enough to, wherever he wants to do it, go on social media, come on this podcast, always welcome, DC, wherever, to say how wrong he was about calling out Eddie Lampkin at the beginning of the season and saying about players that wear 44. I mean, to just do that without even seeing what Eddie would do on the court first, let alone the things that Eddie has done in the community and how he did represent the 44 just fine this year in a losing season, unfortunately, but I think he was worthy of the number, which is by no means as close to as what it is in football. Derek Coleman, John Wallace, great names have wore that number, but for Coleman to just come out and just crap all over Eddie Lampkin before he had a chance to establish himself, I hope that, look, we all spout off opinions on social media. Everybody deserves a chance to kind of say, oh, I was wrong about that. So I just hope DC does, because that was a win in the portal. Syracuse got what they needed out of Lampkin to the point where once he got healthy, they ran their offense through him. And if they're 14 and 19 with him, what would they be without him? Right? God bless Naheem McLeod. He's not a guy that could carry this team offensively. He actually had some quality minutes in the first half of this game. So, look, Lampkin was a win. Davis had his moments. Certainly, he got better as the season went along, but just wasn't consistent through the year. Carlos got better towards the end of the year, but took too long to adjust to this level of basketball, and I don't think you can consider that a win. I think Syracuse has to go out there and find a quality point guard in the portal, ideally somebody that's played but has a couple years of eligibility on top of that, and somebody that is just a better player than Jaquan Carlos was overall. And again, Another great guy. All these guys were awesome to talk to in the locker room. Lucas Taylor, I would put in that category as well. He got into foul trouble early tonight and just he had a bad couple of games for Syracuse, just could not contribute to the level you need a Lucas Taylor to, not only on the defensive end, but to go out there and be one of your primary three-point shooters, which he just couldn't do once he got into foul trouble in this game. They're all great guys, and they were all awesome to talk to, but by and large, if you're just looking at just look at the final record. You rebuilt your roster with these guys. They went 14-19. It didn't work. So the lesson is you got to upgrade. You got to find better players. You got to pay more, and you can't be trying to elevate guys from Delaware, Georgia State, Hofstra to Syracuse. Lampkin came from Colorado. Okay, so I'm not saying all Syracuse's transfers have to come from a Power 4, Power 5 league, but it'd be a pretty darn good idea if it did, right? But we're going to have plenty of time to discuss that. And Chris and I are going to do that in the live pod, right? What I want to do is turn this over now. Our insiders have been incredible all year. Everybody that watches and listens to the show has been awesome all year long. But I want to turn this over and get as many comments from our insiders in as we can, because I asked them a question and I want to turn the floor over to them to get some answers there. So a mix of some comments that you had, but also the answer to my question, which was the 2024-25 season was blank. Just what is the word that pops to mind about this season, right? So let's go through them. Daniel L. says, Syracuse basketball season was frustrating, numbing, and most of all confusing. A team that by and large was much more talented and experienced than last year's team, ending up having the worst season of that past 40-plus years. Truly not a single exciting moment. I can't disagree with anything Daniel said there. This season does not have a hang your hat on it moment. You didn't even have, how about Quadir Copeland, by the way, led McNeese State into the NCAA tournament today with 18 points. He had the buzzer beater against Miami. Syracuse beat North Carolina at the Dome last year. They didn't have that. What are you going to say it is this year? Some of the overtime games earlier in the year, you're going to be bragging about beating Youngstown State in double overtime, the triple overtime game against Boston College. I mean, that was a fun game to sit and watch and experience, but it wasn't a great game. Virginia, at the end of the year, like, that's the thing about it. It was kind of a lost season. They didn't have any big-time game, moment, upset, win that you really say, oh, well, at least we got that, right? You could say maybe the Florida State game in the ACC tournament last night, but that's it's slim pickings on that list. Brian C. says, the end of the first half and the entire second half encapsulates Syracuse's entire season. I had hoped it wouldn't happen. Joe F. says, never been happier to see a basketball season end in my 40 years, and that's kind of upsetting, but honest. I think a lot of people are like, let's just get this thing over with and move on and rebuild and try and get back to where Syracuse basketball needs to be. I mean, the mandate for Adrian Autry next year is NCAA tournament. If they don't make the NCAA tournament, and there's been some discussions about, well, what if they win 22 games but just miss out? What if they're out? I don't want to hear any ifs, ands, or buts, or candy or nuts. It's NCAA tournament or bust, or you got to move on from Adrian Autry. It is that simple. That is the orange standard. That orange standard, that sign that is in his office that he has tried to define, which nobody can really kind of latch on to, as something that makes you say, yeah, Syracuse basketball, orange standard. The standard is you make the tournament around here. You can't go a presidential cycle and an Olympic cycle 4 years without making the NCAA tournament and consider yourself a serious big-time college basketball program. They haven't been ranked since December of 2018. They have now not made the tournament in 4 years. That's a crisis by Syracuse basketball standards. So I don't want to hear anybody say, well, what? They win 23, but they're just, the Syracuse has been screwed out of the tournament before. What? No. Make the tournament. Leave no doubt. Do not give the Lenardi's or the selection committee or anybody a shadow of a doubt whether you belong in the tournament. That is the standard here. And if in 3 years you can't meet that, you got to move on. And I would say that about Adrian Autry or anybody else that was in that position at Syracuse basketball. You got to have some standards. Hold yourself to the orange standard. I'm tired of excuses, right? It's a pretty clear line that you draw. Make the tournament. If you make the tournament, that's your ticket to coach again. It's that simple. It'd be a hell of a story if they do, because they've got to build a roster that's got to make marked improvements on a lot of things. But it's that simple to me, and I agree with Joe on that. Mike W. says, Rutgers finished 15-17 with 2 top 5 lottery picks. Syracuse has 2 top high school babies in let me backtrack. We have 2 top high school babies. That's Sadiq White and Kian Anthony. JJ Bell, who's been awful most of the time. Cuff, who's too short. They have got to kill it in the portal. A lot of pressure on Sadiq and Kian to come in and be players that hit the ground running as quickly as possible. Everybody needs an adjustment period. You got to be fair about that. There's going to be a lot of hype around Kian, a lot of attention on Kian. Carmelo and Lala Anthony are going to be sitting there courtside. Maybe we start to see some celebrities coming back with Lala and Carmelo. All great. You want to bring some attention to the program? Carmelo did it once before as a player, and now he's going to do it again as a father. Awesome. Because Syracuse does need some discernible buzz in that building. They have to give people a reason to watch beyond basketball at this point until the basketball gets better. That's all great. But Mike makes a great point here. Rutgers had 2 top 5 picks and had a losing season because you still have to coach these players. They still have to be put into a right system, and they still have to make that transition to the college game as quickly as possible. Brian N. says, portal wish list in order: a stud point guard, an elite 3-point shooter, and 2 centers. Let's not forget Naheem McLeod, also out of eligibility on this team. Rock and run. This is why I have no faith in Adrian Autry as a coach, because he has no control on what is going on or any idea how to fix it. Rock and run, not helping. Mark in San Diego. By the way, Ron, football coming back. We're going to be doing a lot of spring practice pods. Secret voicemail line. We got to get some rock and Ron voicemails back soon. Mark in San Diego. Other than Donnie Freeman, there's not a single player on this team that I might want to come back for next year. From Seth B., who says, well, thankfully this awful season is over. Kudos to the players who have always played hard. Wish Lampkin would come back. Loved his game and his attitude. I'd like to see only more Freeman and JJ back. If Red can't get this team to the NCAA tournament next year, you got to move on. Open the checkbook and get a name coach like a Jay Wright before this program goes the way of Georgetown. I think Jay Wright's done coaching, but I get the spirit of the thing there. Seth. Gabe, give this season a D. What would you say is your letter grade, Brent? About the same. I'd say about a D, maybe D minus, right? We were joking around Chris Farley last night. Tommy Boy, D plus. Solid D for this team. Post-game thought, on a positive note, can you share with the insiders what you thought was our most exciting victory? You know, we were just talking about that a minute ago. Like, what is the moment from this season that makes you say, well, at least they had that? I guess I'd go with Florida State, because they finally held off a team, blew a big lead, but dug in, played hard, won a game in March, which is great, but go through the regular season, not a lot of games that, kind of blow your hair back, to be honest, right? The Virginia game was nice, but Virginia was just a bad team that Syracuse played well against. So at least you could breathe a sigh of relief against a team, which you couldn't even, guys, this started against Lemoyne. I'm sitting there watching this team struggle against Lemoyne, and hey, great for what Lemoyne's doing. They just went D1, and I love the people over there, and I wish them all the success and luck in the world, but Syracuse is struggling to beat Lemoyne in game 1, and the red flag is starting to rise. I'm like, okay, well, game 1, whatever. And then they always struggle against Colgate. You're like, okay, well, this isn't good. And then the Youngstown State, they go to double overtime. And that's when I kind of knew, like, this team is not what it needs to be. But you had to be fair, let it play out. Would they get better? A lot of new guys in the lineup, the whole thing. But I think we kind of knew then, right? So go back to then to now and say to yourself, what is that moment that Gabe asked? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing an obvious choice here, but deflating is a good word here, as Lori puts it, a true fan nightmare with delusions of mediocrity and glimmers of a full game played well. But says, here's to a hopeful 25-26. I think Dave's got a good word here. Dave W. says underwhelming is the word he would pick. I do believe that Red can turn it around. He needs better players, and he needs another year of head coaching experience. From Jake, who says, I'll say this, for all the complaints about Autry, and there are many, this team never quit on him. That's got to mean something. It means a little bit. He did hold them together. That locker room did not fissure. They did play hard to the end. But as I said last night, I'll reiterate tonight. This team does play hard. It does not play smart. And that's from the top down. And all that's got to change in one offseason, like that's a lot to ask. You can give an average chef better ingredients. It doesn't make him a better cook. Autry has to prove you give him better players, you give him better ingredients, you give him more NIL money and the whole deal, that he can make you a good meal. We shall see. From Jack W., Syracuse basketball's season was a reality check. That's a great answer to that question, Jack. From Kevin, who says Syracuse basketball season was shocking to me. I really thought they were going to be better than last year going into this season. John P. says this season is mercifully over. It's time to finally turn the page to next year and figure out once and for all if Autry is going to be the right guy. This coming year is his last chance. If it's anything even remotely close to this year, he has to go. The NCAA tournament has to be the standard. Couldn't say it's better myself, John. Larry F. says something. I like this answer to this question. This season was what? Something we'll laugh about in 5 years after beating UConn in the Final Four. Wow. Larry, like it. Ryan F. says it was embarrassing. People in the office are starting to forget Cuse ever had national relevance. A younger guy today asked me, who would want to play basketball at Syracuse? Stings, but Kyan wants to play at Syracuse. Sadiq White wants to play at Syracuse. I'm intrigued by Luke Fennell, who they're bringing in from Australia. Sharpshooter, 6'6" guard that they need out there. He can run the point and play shooting guard. I haven't seen a ton of Aaron Womack. I've seen some stats from Aaron Womack's games, scoring over 50 points a couple times this year. Also 6'6", but not enough to make me say, oh, they'll be fine, because they're bringing in those guys. I just haven't seen enough of them to feel that way. I want to go into our Syracuse Sports Insider text line because I didn't have time. I got so many texts on this question, and I didn't have time to make a graphic for everybody. So sorry that you're not all going to get on the screen here, but I want to shout out as many of you as I can here on that word. Jake says, in a word, depressing, but this team never gave up on Autry. Glenn says Syracuse had no direction for this game, especially in the second half. The players looked dejected, confused, and tired. Chris just says, go Orange. Antonio says, somebody had to stay up late for this one. The team clearly went to sleep. Disappointing is a word that John S. picks. Exhausting, Don P. says. Patrick, my man, says crap. He just says crap. That reminds me of a great Saturday Night Live skit, right? Mike Myers back in the day. Welcome to all things Scottish. If it's not Scottish, it's crap. Matt says a better word is unacceptable. I wonder what his first word was. Randy says train wreck. Joe says a season not watched. Jared A. says a disaster. Jack says mercifully over. Paul says at least they held SMU to less than 75 points. Woohoo. Roger W. says garbage. I believe this is Dan, but he just says forgettable. Michael C. says underdeveloped, a team that never gelled, a bunch of players that played hard but never really looked like a team. Jack H. says Syracuse basketball season was inexcusable, unacceptable, terrible, and Adrian Autry's fault. Brian C. bleeping, humiliating. I know it's the internet, but I'll spare you the bad words. A bloodbath. Che says that was Sam in Syracuse. And I spelled that out. It's one of my favorite texter lines. Salmon Syracuse. S-A-L-M-O-N Syracuse. Salmon Syracuse. Get it? Che says a sad sight. Michael S. says disjointed. Just going through the text here. I really appreciate all you guys staying up late tonight on the East Coast to chime in here. Matt S. disappointing, disaster, not competitive, forgettable, and thank God it's over. Joe says we should do the post-game show like a funeral. Michael Antonio says This team is utter gluteus minimus. Kyle just says, joke. You get the sense, right? People are blowing off steam here for sure. Ben, my guy, courtside the last 2 games, made the effort to go in Charlotte. Says a dumpster fire of epic proportions, and thank God it's over. Nigel just says disappointing. Buddy P, shout out to him, says he's looking forward to a weekend trip to Atlanta in August to start the football season. Guys, don't skip over lacrosse now. Richard G just says horrible. A lot of disappointing. Just a lot of people saying disappointing. Disheartening here from Steve S. James F. My guy, devastating. Matty P says memorably forgettable. Can you say that? Memorably forgettable. Brian N. called it a root canal. Steve says disappointing. Kevin H. says gross. Drew Sweeney. Shout out to Drew. Bad, real bad, generationally bad. My guy Nick says result of not having the right pieces to the puzzle. Well, now you got to go get the right pieces to the puzzle. And even if you do, can Adrian Autry put the puzzle together? Right? It takes a certain kind of person to do a puzzle. I can't do puzzles. I hate puzzles. To the people that can dump out a box of 1,000 puzzle pieces and put that together, shout out to you. I can't do it. Don't have the patience for it. We'll see if Autry can do it. And we'll give Michael G the last word here. The worst bomb of a Q's basketball season since I was born over 51 years ago. So as you can see, our insiders took that question to heart, blew off some steam, and now you take a deep breath and you say, how do you fix this? Right? Another great Saturday Night Live skit, by the way. You need to fix this. We know what the answer is, at least technically. You've got to hit a home run in the portal. Shameless plug, I did an entire pod about this. That is up on our Syracuse Sports YouTube page, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're subscribed to your podcast. I went the other way. It's easy to complain about this team. I said, here are 5 ways that Adrian Autry can not only succeed as head coach at Syracuse next year, but in the future, right? So you can go back and listen to that pod, but the big things are you got to find your Kyle McCord. And I don't mean that just as you got to find the best guy you can in the portal. You got to find that player or players for that matter. And maybe it's Sadiq and Kion. Could be. But what this team lacked, not that they didn't have some players that we appreciated. I think Eddie Lampkin kind of became this guy in a way, but man, they got to find a player that not only helps you win, but is a reason to go to the game. You know, honestly, was there anybody on this team that you bought a ticket just to watch play? I don't think anybody rose to that level, right? They need that. Kyle McCord became a player, and I know we're not comparing apples to apples here with football to basketball, but even Alan Griffin has said this, that they got to find their Kyle McCord. And it's not just the talent. It's give me a reason to watch and be magnetized and drawn to. And this is an era, not that college basketball hasn't had stars before, right? But this is an era where it's harder to find those guys, but the opportunity's there to find those guys in the portal. So Syracuse not only needs its McCord talent-wise, it needs to find players that people want to come see play, that will pay money to see play in a season that had the 3rd lowest attendance in Dome history, right? And that's a myriad of factors why that happened. That's a lot of places attendance is down, but when you've got a losing product and you don't really have that discernible, I got to be there type of guy to go watch, it all adds up at the end. Parking, concessions, the whole thing, the weather, there's a lot of reasons attendance was down. And by the way, that was, it was just over 320,000. That's tickets sold. The actual butts and seats, a lot lower than that, right? But we've all seen it before, guys. Okay? You know I love you, but this is a fair weather town. And it's a fair weather fan base. And if they bring in a star or two, they'll be back. They will be back like that. It's just how it works. Sports, right? I don't want to go through all the reasons of why Autry can succeed because I want you to listen to that pod, but that's a big one to me. Basketball-wise, the most important thing this team has to do, they have to figure out how to play better defense. Bottom line. They played zone, they played man, they played this, they played that. They've got to figure out how to play better defense and consistently. That is the most important basketball thing that they can do next year. Sadiq White is 6'9", is a Hakeem Warwick clone and can play D. But he's still a freshman, still has to get bigger. Kyan Anthony can score in the paint. He's a good shooter. He's a good player. I think if his last name was Jones, he wouldn't be a top 100 player, frankly. There's going to be a lot of expectations on him right out of the chute, right? He's got to get a lot bigger. And I'm not sure about him defensively. That's not why you're bringing him in. Whoever you bring in, top to bottom, soup to nuts, collectively, this team has got to be obsessed with defense next year, which is a hard ask these days. It's the TikTok era, and everybody wants to be, the player on the offensive highlights. But committing to defense is a mentality, and there's plenty of teams that succeed in college basketball now that do commit to it. That is the top priority basketball-wise. I'd like to see a discernible offense. I'd like to see a lot of things that this team just didn't have, certainly on the other side of the ball, but defense. They have to be obsessed with getting better on defense, and that's coaching. That's instilling an attitude, your orange standard, that defense creates offense, that defense, look at SMU tonight. SMU won this game tonight because they committed to defending mostly Eddie Lampkin, but defending whoever had the ball to the point that by the end, Syracuse was just out of gas because their will got sucked out of their body by the way that SMU played defense. Wouldn't it be nice to see that next year from Syracuse? We have seen that before the zone fell apart and a number of things fell apart, and now we find ourselves in this spot. We could talk well into the night about what Syracuse basketball needs going forward, but we're not going to do that because we've got plenty of discussion coming on that through this entire offseason, but we've got plenty of discussion coming on that in our next pod. So this was our last postgame show, certainly, of the year, right? But every Thursday, Chris Carlson and I and other guests that have joined us, but Chris and I are kind of the core group that gets together on Thursday on a lot of these channels you're watching. But again, please subscribe, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And so you can see us, and we'll pop on live on a lot of our syracuse.com Facebook channels, on Twitter and different places, so you can watch it live. But the best place to watch it live is our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube channel. A lot of you are watching on YouTube right now. That's the best place to catch the live pod. So Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern time, and we're going to spend the Thursday live pod this week on a lot of the questions that I'm sure you guys have. Who's staying? Who's going? What's this roster going to look like? I don't know who's in the portal. We're starting to see players. And now you can put your name in the portal anytime you want. The portal does not open until 2 weeks from Sunday. So they can't make any moves and sign any players until then. It's not like NFL free agency where they have the legal tampering period, although I'm sure there's plenty of that going on in college basketball. But the test of Alex Klein knowing who's in the portal, who to target, who to prioritize, so once you can actually start signing players, off we go. Who is Syracuse targeting? Do they have the money to pay them? And boy, a fascinating and important offseason is technically underway. So we'll start to see, as seasons end in conference tournaments, teams that did not make the NCAA tournament, but those are the guys you want. I mean, Dan Hurley the other day is doing an interview on 60 Minutes saying half of his roster could be in the portal. Freaking Connecticut. I know they didn't have the year they've had in national championship level years, the two prior to this, right? But even UConn is going to lose half their roster. So that is how we will watch the NCAA tournament, right? Not only filling out our brackets, but like, is that going to be, you think he's going to go in the portal? Is he going to go in the portal? You think we're going to be obsessed with that for the next 2 weeks, watching mostly the NCAA tournament, but maybe a little bit of the NIT, right? In the conference tournaments. It's kind of taking notes, mental notes. Like, you think that guy's going to go in the portal? So that is what we're left to do. But bottom line, through this whole thing, this whole offseason, until they play again next year, from here until November, and it's going to fly by as always, you got to make the tournament. And there's no exceptions to that. None. The Orange Standard is to make the NCAA tournament, and if they don't, we're going to be having a fascinating conversation next year about blowing this thing up and starting all over again. But we'll see if they can rescue this thing and build a roster that is capable of making the tournament. That's the goal. That's the standard. That is your mission, should you choose to accept it. It's going to be a fascinating offseason, to say the least. Before we go, though, a heartfelt thank you from me to you. You guys were here all season long. This was not a fun season for the most part. We did have some fun on this show, though, and you know I appreciate, especially tonight. I mean, we're sitting here talking. It's 1 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. You stayed up late. You came for the noon games. You came for the home games, the road games throughout a frustrating season. It is my pleasure to be here on this podcast and on the Syracuse Sports Insider text line to just have you guys vent and express your opinions and ask questions and just talk Syracuse basketball. It is my pleasure to do that. What a privilege I have to be somebody who's kind of sitting there in the town square, the digital town square of Syracuse basketball, and just listening to you guys. I've gotten to know a lot of you, not only through the text line. I've seen you thank you to everybody that came and said hello at the Dome this year. I can't tell you how that warms my heart that you guys would seek me out, even just to come over and say hello. Thank you for that. And just thanks to everybody that listened and watched the pod. If it was live or if you listen on demand whenever you want, which is the beauty of this thing, right? That's why I love the podcast world that we're in now. So thank you for that, especially through what was a tough season, right? You guys are true fans. You are dedicated. You are educated. You are passionate. And I am lucky to be able to do this and to talk to such amazing fans. So thank you so much for being here all year for the pod. But as we said, the pod goes on. We've got spring football to cover. We've got lacrosse to cover, and Syracuse Sports Insider text line. We're going to crank this thing out. But now we know that the basketball season is officially over. Syracuse finishes 14-19 on the year, and onward we go into what will be the most important offseason and one of the more fascinating offseasons in the history of Syracuse basketball. So thank you guys so much for being here all year long. Thanks to Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner of Syracuse Athletics, for sponsoring our post-game shows. Once again, our amazing partners at Krause Health. Thank you so much. And we'll keep it rolling. Live pod Thursday, 3 o'clock. Come hang as we will kind of decide who's going to stay and who's going to go and what this roster will start to look like and how many holes Alex Klein and company is going to have to fill. So we'll do that. Please subscribe, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Please sign up and become a part of our growing community of passionate Syracuse fans on our Syracuse Sports Insider text line. We would love for you to join the group. Until then, thank you so much for watching tonight and all season long. This has been Syracuse Basketball Postgame. My name is Brent Axe. We'll catch you next time, guys. Thank you.